It was a quiet morning in the small countryside town of Maple Creek, where life moved at its own unhurried pace. Birds chirped from the old oak trees, and golden sunlight kissed the endless fields of wheat. Among those fields worked a humble man named Ethan Cole, a poor farmer known for his kind heart, honesty, and the rough calluses that told the story of years of hard work. He lived alone in a small wooden house his late father had built, struggling to keep his land from being sold to debt collectors. Ethan had no idea that this ordinary morning would change his life forever. Just a few miles away, Olivia Hart, a stunning and elegant woman in her early 30s, was racing down the same rural road in her black SUV. She was a millionaire, CEO of a major city real estate company. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages, deals, and boardroom updates. But that morning, she wasn't thinking about her empire. She had come to Maple Creek seeking peace after a painful breakup and the growing emptiness her wealth couldn't fill. As she looked down briefly to silence another call, she didn't notice the sharp turn ahead. The SUV's tires screeched. Gravel flew. The car swerved out of control, speeding toward the open fields, toward Ethan's farm. Ethan, who had been loading hay bales, heard the terrifying sound of metal grinding and tires skidding. Without hesitation, he dropped everything and sprinted toward the chaos. The SUV crashed through a wooden fence and flipped sideways, smoke curling from the hood. "Help! Somebody, please!" a woman's panicked voice cried out from inside. Ethan didn't think twice. He yanked open the jammed door, cutting his hand in the process. The air smelled of gasoline and burning rubber. "Ma'am, hold still," he said firmly, his deep voice calm despite the danger. He unclipped her seatbelt and pulled her out just seconds before the engine began to smoke heavily. Olivia stumbled out, coughing, her knees weak. Ethan guided her to safety under a nearby tree. "You're safe now," he said softly, brushing dirt from her arm. His shirt was torn, his hands bleeding slightly, but his eyes were steady and full of warmth. For a long moment, Olivia just stared at him. She had met countless men in tailored suits, speaking with smooth confidence, but none had ever looked at her like this. No greed, no hidden motive. Just genuine concern. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan gave a shy smile. Anyone would have done the same. But Olivia knew that wasn't true. Most people would have stood frozen, waiting for help. He'd risked his life for a stranger. As the ambulance arrived, Ethan quietly slipped away, returning to his work before anyone could even ask his name. Later that night, as Olivia sat in the hospital with only a few bruises, she couldn't get the image of that rugged man out of her mind. The way his rough hands had trembled slightly after pulling her free, or how he'd looked genuinely relieved to see her safe. She asked the local sheriff about him, and within a day, she had his name. The next morning, Olivia drove, slowly this time, to Ethan's small farm. He was there, fixing his old tractor. When he saw her car, he looked surprised. "Miss Hart," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I came to thank you properly," she said, stepping out with a smile. "And maybe, return the favor." He chuckled. "You don't owe me anything, ma'am." But Olivia wasn't convinced. Over the next few weeks, she found herself visiting often. Sometimes she'd bring food or offer to help with small things around the farm. Sometimes she'd just sit on the porch with him, listening to the wind rustle through the cornfields. For the first time in years, she felt real peace. Ethan, on the other hand, tried to keep his distance. He was humble, aware of the vast difference between their worlds. She was a millionaire businesswoman from the city, and he was a poor farmer barely making ends meet. But the more time they spent together, the more impossible it became to ignore the growing connection between them. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, they stood side by side watching the horizon. "You know," Olivia said softly, "back in the city, everyone wants something from me, money, power, connections. But when I'm here, I just feel like myself again." Ethan looked at her, his gaze gentle. "You don't need to be anyone else here." She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "You've given me something I didn't think I could find again, trust." That night, As the fireflies danced in the fields, something changed between them. Their hands brushed, and Ethan finally allowed himself to look at her not as someone unreachable, but as someone who'd found her way into his heart. Days turned into weeks, and rumors began to spread through the small town. People whispered about the wealthy woman and the poor farmer spending time together. But neither cared. They worked side by side, planting new crops, rebuilding the broken fence from the accident, and sharing laughter that filled the empty spaces of Ethan's lonely home. One afternoon, as they took a break under the same tree where he'd saved her, Olivia said quietly, "You changed my life that day, Ethan. Not just because you saved me, but because you reminded me what really matters." He turned to her, his rough hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And what's that?" "Love," she whispered. "Real, honest love." Ethan's heart pounded. "Olivia, I'm just a farmer. I don't have much to give." She smiled through tears. "You've already given me everything I was missing." In that moment, beneath the wide open sky, she leaned forward and kissed him, soft, slow, and filled with gratitude. Months passed, and their relationship grew stronger despite their different worlds. Olivia began investing quietly in the town, helping farmers modernize their equipment, but she never flaunted her wealth around Ethan. He, in turn, worked harder than ever, determined to stand beside her as an equal. One morning, she found him standing by the fence, holding a small box. "I was going to wait," he said nervously, "but I can't anymore." Inside was a simple silver ring, nothing fancy, but it shone in the sunlight. "Olivia Hart," he said, his voice trembling, "you came into my life like a storm I never saw coming. I don't have riches, but I promise you honesty, love, and a lifetime of sunsets right here." Tears filled her eyes. She smiled and whispered, "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." Their wedding was small but beautiful, held right there on the farm. Olivia wore a simple white dress, and Ethan looked proud in his clean shirt and tie. The townsfolk gathered to celebrate the couple who had proven that love knows no class, no money, no boundaries. As they danced under the stars, Olivia rested her head against his chest. "You know," she said softly, "if that accident hadn't happened, I'd still be lost." Ethan kissed her forehead. "Maybe it wasn't an accident," he said. "Maybe it was fate's way of bringing you home." From that day forward, the poor farmer and the millionaire woman built a life together, one built not on wealth, but on gratitude, faith, and a love that had been born in the most unexpected moment. Years later, whenever people passed by the farm, they'd often see them sitting together under that same old tree, still laughing like the day they first met. And whenever someone asked how a farmer and a millionaire found each other, Ethan would smile and say, "Sometimes, when life spins out of control, it's just steering you toward the person you were meant to find."